Welcome to tonight's Spooktober special. That's right, it's October, we're looking at Halloweeny things. I'll be here every Wednesday all through the month in the run-up to releasing my second book. Very exciting stuff. So, what have I got for you tonight then? Tonight we're going to be looking at the vampire, the myth and the reality. So we're not looking at the vampires that you know today, the sparkly vampires from Twilight, the elite Count Dracula in his castle in Transylvania. They're all very much modern conceptions of the vampire. The vampire has been around very much since ancient times. It's one of the earliest demon creatures of the world. There are examples of it referred to in ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, Greece, you name it, somewhere has a vampire myth. It comes from this inherent fear that human beings have that the dead will always rise. There is something we may have done to them in life that means they will not rest easy, and a vampire is one of the scariest things we can come across. Their popularity really rose through the 16th to 18th centuries, along with a disease called consumption. Vampires are always associated with kinds of disease that go around, very much so with plague earlier on in the 13th, 14th centuries, vampires rife, and consumption in the 16th through to 19th centuries. Now, consumption is a disease that sort of wastes you away. You become pale, you suffer a lot of weight loss, you waste away. It's like a blood disease. Tuberculosis is what we know it as these days. There is a cure for it now. There wasn't then. And it usually affected entire families, so what would happen is your first person catches it, they die, and the rest of the family slowly die off. There is your vampire. The first one who died was clearly bitten by a vampire from outside somewhere, and then took the rest of the family with them. And because everyone lives in little tight-knit communities, it's very easy to hunt your vampire. So what you have, certainly through the 16th to 19th centuries, is vampire hunters. In the USA it's so popular they actually have vampire hunting kits that are Victorian sort of age, so colonial period. You can find them on eBay if you look hard enough. They're worth a look. Very scary stuff in there. Crucifixes, silver bullets, etc, etc. Coming back to Europe, where the myth is more popular, what you have is people looking for vampires. You go out, you exhume the person who has been recently buried. I am going to get a little bit gross here and talk about decomposition. It's part of what's going on. If you're a little bit squeamish, you may want to run away. The rest of us, stay here. So what happens is you open the coffin of the recently deceased. Victorians certainly had a habit of burying people before they were dead because they didn't understand comas, so occasionally you get fingernail scratches on the inside, a clear sign your undead has been trying to escape. Not that they buried someone alive by accident, of course, no, wouldn't think of that at all. The other thing that you have is that because of the way human bodies decompose, it looks like they could still be alive. Your skin shrinks, which means the fingernails grow, the hair still looks like it grows, and most importantly of all to the vampire mythology, as the lips peel back, your teeth become very prominent. Vampires, teeth, we can see where we're going here. The other thing is, as the organs decay, they release a lot of fluid, which tends to come out nose and mouth. This is a very dark fluid and will look a lot like dried blood to people who don't understand what they're looking at is decomposition. So look, you found your vampire. What do we do with a vampire? Well, most law says we stake it. Now there's a very good story from the Victorian period in Britain of a chap who did stake his vampire. Unfortunately, the other side effect of decomposition is that the human body fills with gas. You put a stake in it, interesting things happen. In this case, the man put his stake in, hammered it, and the whole corpse sat up and screamed at him, which we know is a release of gas, but let me tell you, if I'd have been there with him, I'd have run away. He stuck around to make sure that his vampire was dead. So there you go, vampire hunting, vampire lore. The interesting thing with vampires is that we have the archaeological evidence for their existence, or the belief in their existence, shall we say. No one has conclusively proved one of the burials is a vampire. In Venice, there are a bunch of famous skeletons that were decapitated and all have bricks shoved into the mouth. Stop the dead rising, stop those teeth coming to get you. In Poland, there's a famous example that actually has a metal stake through the heart, impaled in, keep it in its tomb. There are other examples where the body has been exhumed, put back in, and crushed with stone. This isn't a fragmented tombstone on the top. There's a lot of stone crushing the vampire underneath. Don't let it escape. An awful lot of them are decapitated, heads between the knees. It's one of the methods to kill a vampire. You'll probably find it in a vampire film somewhere. Mostly the Hammer ones with Christopher Lee. He does a very good number of vampire deaths. They're all worth a watch. And in Bulgaria, there's a great example of a skeleton that's been bound into its tomb with iron bars. Like you get on a barrel, it's been buried there, bands nailing it into the tomb. So there we go. In summary, your vampire could well exist. It's been around since the very earliest stories that we have. We have archaeological evidence for them being there. but unfortunately, to destroy the mythology completely, we also know a lot of reasons for the vampire were disease and a misunderstanding of the disintegration of the human body after death. So there we go, vampires. That's all from me for tonight. I'll be back next Wednesday with more scary, spooky, weird, historical, archaeological goings-on in the world. Have a lovely evening, and I will see you again next week. Good night.